You know the exact feeling. They corner you, they twist your words. They throw a baseless accusation at you with the precision of someone who has rehearsed this attack 1,000 times. And instantly, your heart races. Your throat tightens. You desperately try to defend yourself, to explain logic to a person who was never interested in logic, to present evidence to a jury that already decided you were guilty before you opened your mouth. And you walk away exhausted, replaying every word, wishing you had said something different, feeling like you lost yet again. You always lose, not because you are wrong, but because you keep showing up to a rigged game and playing by rules that were designed to ensure you never win. You have been conditioned to believe that if you just explain yourself clearly enough, they will understand. If you just stay calm enough, they will see reason. If you just present the facts with enough patience, the truth will prevail. This is a fatal lie. It is the single most dangerous piece of psychological programming ever installed in an intelligent mind. They understand you perfectly. They have always understood you. They are not confused by your words. They are attacking you specifically to provoke a reaction, because your emotional energy is the only fuel their fractured, hollow ego can run on. Their soul is entirely empty. And your defense, your frustration, your desperate need to be understood, that is the only meal they know how to eat. If you are sick of being the emotional punching bag for toxic people who twist reality until you question your own sanity, your submission ends right here. Do not look away. Do not tell yourself this is just another self-help video. Today, we are opening Carl Jung's darkest psychological texts and merging them with the most ruthless principles of dark psychology, to teach you something that will permanently alter every confrontation you ever have for the rest of your life. It is called the shadow reversal, and it is the art of making your enemies completely destroy themselves while you do absolutely nothing. That quote is not philosophy. It is a weapon. Jung just handed you the blueprint for understanding every manipulator, narcissist, and emotional predator who has ever targeted you. Every accusation they hurled at you was a confession. Every attack was a mirror they could not bear to look into, so they smashed it against your face instead. They called you selfish because they cannot confront their own selfishness. They called you cold because they are terrified of the void inside their own chest. They called you crazy because acknowledging your sanity would force them to audit their own. Their shadow, the collection of every trait they refuse to own, was never aimed at you because of who you are. It was aimed at you because of who they cannot admit they are. Here is what the dark psychology of manipulation defense reveals, and what your years of over-explaining have kept you from seeing. You were never in a conversation. You were never in a disagreement. You were in a psychological extraction operation. Every conflict with a manipulator is designed to achieve one outcome: not resolution, not understanding, not compromise. Extraction. They are extracting your emotional energy, your mental clarity, your sense of self, and your peace. And every single time you defend yourself, every time you raise your voice, every time you try one more time to make them see, you are not fighting back. You are hemorrhaging. You are opening your veins and letting them drink. What if your absolute dead-eyed indifference is the most violent psychological strike you could ever deliver? What if the reason you have never won against these people is not that you lack intelligence or arguments or truth, but that you have been using the wrong weapon entirely? What if the most devastating thing you could ever do to a manipulator is not outsmart them, not out-argue them, not expose them, but simply become an emotional void so complete, so impenetrable, so psychologically terrifying, that their entire strategy collapses the moment it touches your silence? That is what this video will teach you. Not theory, not platitudes. the exact psychological warfare mechanics of how to become the most dangerous person a manipulator has ever encountered. A blank wall that reflects their own darkness back into their face until they shatter. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop a "let them break" in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Before you can learn the shadow reversal, you need to understand precisely why you have been losing every confrontation with manipulative people your entire life. And the answer is going to infuriate you. Because it is not complicated, it is brutally simple. You lose because you care. That is it. That is the entire vulnerability. You care about being understood. You care about being seen as fair. You care about truth. You care about being the reasonable one. And every single one of those instincts, every single one of those noble, intelligent, morally admirable qualities is the exact set of chains that a manipulator uses to drag you into their arena and slaughter you. Your anger is their oxygen. Every time you yell back, you are performing CPR on their fragile ego. Sit with that. Every defense you mount is not a wall. It is a door you are holding wide open. Every explanation you offer is not a correction. It is a confession that their opinion still matters to you. And the moment they know their opinion matters to you, they own you. Because the person whose approval you seek is the person who controls your behavior. This is frame control at its most primal. And you have been losing the frame since the first syllable of every argument. Think about what happens in your body during a confrontation with a toxic person. Your heart rate elevates. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic and strategy, begins to shut down as your amygdala hijacks your nervous system. You are flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. You are literally, neurologically, biochemically incapable of strategic thought in that state. And they know this. A master manipulator does not need to study neuroscience. They learn it instinctively. They learn that if they can trigger your emotional response, your intelligence becomes irrelevant. Your logic becomes irrelevant. Your truth becomes irrelevant. Because you are no longer operating from the part of your brain that processes truth. You are operating from the part of your brain that processes threat. And a threatened animal does not strategize. It reacts, it defends, it exhausts itself, and then it submits. Stop bringing logic to a psychological knife fight. You have been walking into a gunfight armed with a dictionary. You have been bringing reasoned arguments to a person whose entire strategy depends on making reason impossible. You have been trying to win a chess game against someone who flips the board every time you get close to checkmate and then blames you for the mess. The game was never fair, the rules were never real. And the only winning move, the only move that has ever worked against this type of psychological warfare, is the one move your conditioning has made you terrified to execute. Total, absolute, uncompromising disengagement. But understanding that you have been trapped is useless if you do not understand the anatomy of the trap itself. Because manipulators do not operate randomly. They follow a precise, predictable blueprint, and once you see it, you will never unsee it. The second thing you must understand before you can deploy the shadow reversal is exactly why the manipulator needs your reaction with the same biological desperation that a parasite needs a host. This is the dark psychology that no one explains to you. A manipulator, a narcissist, a covert emotional predator, they do not attack you because you did something wrong. They do not create conflict because of a genuine disagreement. They attack you because they are experiencing what Jung called shadow inflation, a state where their unprocessed shame, their buried inadequacy, their suppressed self-hatred reaches a critical mass that their ego can no longer contain. And that mass must go somewhere. It must be expelled. It must be transferred onto another human being, or it will destroy them from the inside out. You are not their opponent. You are their toilet. You are the emotional sewage system they have been flushing their psychological waste into for years. And every time you react, every time you absorb their accusations and try to process them as if they are legitimate, you are performing the function they need you to perform. You are metabolizing their darkness so they do not have to. You are carrying their shadow so they can walk around feeling clean, righteous, and victimized while you drown in confusion, self-doubt, and exhaustion. When you refuse to catch the emotional garbage they throw at you, they are forced to hold it themselves. Read that again. When you stop absorbing, they stop functioning. This is not metaphor. This is the core principle of narcissistic collapse. A manipulator's psychological stability depends entirely on their ability to externalize their internal chaos. The moment that ability is removed, the moment the host rejects the parasite, the internal chaos has nowhere to go. It ricochets inside their own psyche. It begins to devour the very ego structure that created it. And they begin to unravel. Not because you attacked them, but because you refused to be their container. This is why your emotional intelligence has been weaponized against you. The more empathetic you are, the more efficiently you absorb. The more you understand their pain, the more willingly you carry it. The more logical you are, the longer you engage trying to fix an equation that was designed to be unsolvable. Your greatest qualities are not your strength in this dynamic. They are the exact vulnerabilities the parasite evolved to exploit. I'm going to teach you the exact mechanism that reverses this entire dynamic. The posture, the silence, the internal architecture that breaks their confidence and turns their weapon against them. But first, you need to understand the Jungian framework that makes this reversal not just possible, but psychologically devastating. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow is the most powerful and most misunderstood idea in all of psychology. Most people hear shadow work and think it means journaling about childhood wounds or meditating on your flaws. That is the domesticated, commercially palatable version. The real shadow, Jung's shadow, is far darker, far more dangerous, and far more useful than any therapist will ever tell you. The shadow is the part of you that you were taught to deny. It is the rage you were told is unacceptable. The coldness you were told makes you a bad person. The ruthlessness you were told is evil. The desire for power you were told is narcissistic. Every time someone told you to be nice, to be accommodating, to be the bigger person, they were shoving another piece of your authentic self into the basement of your psyche and locking the door. And that locked basement is your shadow. It is not your weakness. It is your arsenal. But here is where Jung's insight becomes a weapon in your hands. Jung discovered that whatever you refuse to integrate in yourself, you are doomed to encounter in others. The traits you suppress become the traits that trigger you when you see them in the world. This is projection, and it operates in both directions. The manipulator projects their shadow onto you. They accuse you of the very things they are guilty of. They call you controlling because they cannot face their own need for control. They call you manipulative because acknowledging their own manipulation would collapse their self-image. They call you the problem because if they looked in the mirror, they would see a void where a self should be. Every accusation is an autobiography they are too cowardly to read aloud. But you have been projecting too. You have been projecting your shadow outward in a different way. You suppressed your coldness, your capacity for ruthlessness, your ability to simply not care. You projected those traits onto the manipulator and said, "I could never be that cold. I am the good one. I am the feeling one." And in doing so, you disarmed yourself completely. You voluntarily surrendered the one psychological weapon that would have ended every single one of these conflicts before they began. A master manipulator is terrified of a blank face. It is the one puzzle they cannot solve, because a blank face means their projection has nowhere to land. It means the mirror they were trying to smash against you is suddenly, impossibly, reflecting back at them. And what they see in that reflection, their own emptiness, their own cruelty, their own pathological need for validation through conflict, is the one thing they have spent their entire life running from. This is the foundation of the shadow reversal. You are going to stop suppressing your shadow. You are going to stop pretending you are incapable of coldness. And you are going to integrate the one trait that transforms you from a target into a weapon. Not cruelty, not aggression, something far more devastating, absolute, sovereign, weaponized indifference. Watch what happens to their vocal tone, their posture, their entire psychological architecture when you deploy this in the next section. This is where the technique becomes real. Here is the shadow reversal, and I need you to understand that this is not a trick. It is not a hack. It is a fundamental restructuring of how you exist in the presence of a manipulator. It is not something you do. It is something you become. The first principle of the shadow reversal is this: you do not respond, you observe. The moment a manipulator initiates an attack, whether it is a veiled insult, a guilt trip, a baseless accusation, or an emotional outburst designed to hijack your nervous system, you activate a single internal command. I am not a participant. I am a researcher. You are no longer in the conflict. You are studying the conflict from above, the way a psychologist studies a patient through one-way glass. You are not the target of their words. You are the scientist noting the data. This cognitive reframe is not passive. It is the most active thing you can do. It instantly moves your neural processing from the amygdala back to the prefrontal cortex. It drops your heart rate. It clears the cortisol fog, and it gives you the one thing the manipulator never wanted you to have in their presence: clarity. The second principle is physical stillness. Your body must become a fortress. When they attack, the natural human response is to tense, to lean forward, to mirror their escalation. You will do the opposite. You will consciously relax your shoulders. You will slow your breathing. You will let your facial muscles go completely neutral. Not a smile, not a frown, not a furrowed brow, nothing. Absolute zero. This is not body language management. This is psychological warfare through physicality. Because the manipulator reads your body before they process your words. If your body says, "I am not threatened," their entire aggression script short-circuits. They escalate because they expect resistance. Resistance confirms they have power. When the resistance vanishes, the power vanishes with it. The third principle is silence. Not the silence of defeat, not the silence of someone who cannot find words. The deliberate, weighted, sovereign silence of someone who has calculated the cost of every word and decided that none of them are worth the expenditure. You are not ignoring them to keep the peace. You are ignoring them to wage war. This silence must be unbroken. Not by a sigh, not by a scoff, not by a single micro-expression that betrays internal engagement. Let the silence stretch. Let it become unbearable, because it will not be unbearable for you. You are the architect of this silence. You chose it, you own it. It is your weapon. For the manipulator, however, this silence is an abyss they are falling into without a net. The fourth principle is the most counterintuitive and the most devastating. When you finally speak, if you speak at all, you do not address the content of their attack. You address the behavior with clinical, emotionless precision. You might say, calmly and without inflection, "You seem very upset right now, that is all." 5 words. You have not defended yourself. You have not apologized. You have not explained. You have simply held up a mirror. And in that mirror, they are forced to see not the villain they painted you as, but the unraveling, out-of-control person they actually are in this moment. This is frame control at its highest level. You have reframed the entire interaction. They came in as the prosecutor. You just made them the subject of observation. The power has reversed, and they can feel it in their bones. If you break eye contact during this phase, the frame collapses. Here is how you hold the line. You look at the bridge of their nose, not directly into their eyes. This gives the appearance of unshakable eye contact without the biological stress of direct pupil-to-pupil engagement. Your gaze must communicate one thing: I see everything you're doing, and it does not touch me. That single, sustained look communicates more dominance than any argument you have ever constructed. It communicates that you are not afraid, that you are not confused, that you are not destabilized. And for a person whose entire strategy depends on destabilizing you, that realization is catastrophic. This is where 99% of people break. What comes next is the most critical phase, and if you panic here, you hand them back every ounce of power you just claimed. Listen closely. When you deploy the shadow reversal, when you become the void instead of the target, something predictable and absolutely beautiful happens. They escalate violently, desperately, pathetically. And you must be ready for it, because this escalation phase is where most people lose their nerve, abandon the strategy, and go back to defending, explaining, and losing. Here is what the escalation looks like. The manipulator will first test your silence with a harder provocation. They will say something more outrageous, more hurtful, more specifically designed to hit the nerve they know best. They are increasing the voltage because the previous shock did not produce the reaction they needed. When that fails, they will shift tactics. They may switch from aggression to victimhood. Suddenly, they are the wounded one. Suddenly, you are the monster. The tears appear, the trembling voice, the devastating, "How can you be so cold to me?" This is not emotion. This is strategy. It is the manipulator switching from predator to prey because the predator approach stopped working, and they are scrambling for any tool that will reopen the flow of your emotional energy. They will try to accuse you of being cold or heartless. They will tell you something is wrong with you. They will tell you that you have changed, that you used to care, that you are becoming just like them. This is the most sophisticated attack in their arsenal, because it targets the one thing you are secretly afraid of, that in learning to be cold, you have become the villain. Here is the one thought that protects your mind when they deploy this weapon. Repeat it internally. Their discomfort with my silence is proof that my silence is working. Their need to label my peace as cruelty is proof that my peace is their crisis. Say it again. My peace is their crisis. Engrave it into your nervous system. The most ruthless power move in the history of human interaction is unblinking, sustained silence. Hold it through the escalation. Hold it through the tears, hold it through the accusations, hold it through the door slamming, because every second you hold is a second their internal narrative collapses further. They came into this interaction with a script. You were supposed to defend. You were supposed to crumble. You were supposed to hand them validation through your desperation. You have done none of that. And without your reaction to feed on, their script is useless, their character is meaningless, their entire psychological performance has no audience, and a performer with no audience does not get louder forever. Eventually, inevitably, they get quiet. This is the frantic escalation. It is the storm before their collapse, and your only job, your only strategic imperative, is to be the wall the storm breaks against. Not a wall that pushes back, not a wall that argues, a wall that simply exists, immovable, indifferent, eternal. We are about to reach the part they never prepared for, the psychological collapse. This is where you claim your absolute victory. This is where everything reverses. What you are about to witness, if you hold the line through the frantic escalation, is the single most satisfying and psychologically significant moment in the entire dynamic. It is the moment the manipulator collapses. Not because you attacked them, not because you outsmarted them, not because you exposed them, but because you refuse to exist as their emotional dumping ground, and without that function, their entire psychological architecture has no foundation. Narcissistic collapse is not dramatic in the way you might expect. It is not a Hollywood breakdown. It is quieter, stranger, more unsettling. You will see it in their eyes first. The aggression fades. The calculated cruelty softens. What replaces it is something you have never seen from them before. Confusion, real confusion, not the performed confusion they use to gaslight you. Actual cognitive dissonance. Because their internal model of you, the reactive, emotional, easy-to-manipulate version they have been exploiting, no longer matches the person standing in front of them. You have become a variable their equation cannot solve, and unsolvable variables do not just frustrate manipulators, they terrify them. Because a person they cannot predict is a person they cannot control, and a person they cannot control is a person who might see them as they actually are. The collapse manifests in stages. First, the silence on their end. The attacks stop. The provocations cease. They sit or stand in the wreckage of their own escalation, surrounded by the emotional shrapnel that was meant for you but landed nowhere. Second, the retreat. They will leave the room, the conversation, the situation, not triumphantly, not with a final cutting remark, but with the disoriented, almost confused withdrawal of someone whose entire operating system just encountered a fatal error. Third, and this is the most important stage, the reappraisal. In the hours and days following a true shadow reversal, the manipulator's unconscious mind begins to reclassify you. You are no longer filed under controllable, exploitable, safe to attack. You are refiled under dangerous, unpredictable, not worth the cost. And that reclassification, that neurological relabeling, changes every interaction you will ever have with that person from this point forward. You did not yell, you did not cry, you did not lose a single calorie of energy. You stood in your shadow, the part of you that is capable of perfect surgical coldness, and you let it do what it was always designed to do, protect you, not through aggression, through absence, through the most violent form of nonviolence a human psyche can produce. Total, absolute, dead-eyed indifference. This is Carl Jung's shadow work in its most tactically advanced form. You did not just defend yourself. You integrated the part of you that society told you was evil, the coldness, the detachment, the capacity to watch another person's discomfort and choose, deliberately and without guilt, not to fix it. You brought your shadow out of the basement, handed it the keys, and let it stand guard at the door of your psyche. And nothing gets past that guard. At the end of this video, I will give you the precise mental anchor that ensures you never take their bait ever again. But first, understand what you have actually accomplished. You have not just won an argument, you have rewritten the psychological contract. Every manipulator in your life operates on an unspoken agreement. I push, you react, I attack, you defend, I create chaos, you create order so I can destroy it again. The shadow reversal does not renegotiate that contract. It shreds it, and in its place it establishes a new one written entirely in your silence, one whose only clause reads, I am no longer available for this. You have walked through the architecture of the most powerful manipulation defense in the history of human psychological warfare. You began this video as someone who walked away from every confrontation exhausted, confused, and defeated. You now possess the framework to walk into every confrontation as the most dangerous person in the room. Not because you are aggressive, not because you are cruel, but because you are empty. Strategically, deliberately, magnificently empty, a void that reflects, a mirror that does not crack, a silence so heavy it crushes every attack before it lands. Let me remind you what happened. You learned that your reactivity was never weakness of character. It was a cage built by conditioning, designed to keep you predictable and exploitable. You learned that the manipulator is not a powerful adversary. They are a parasite, biologically dependent on your emotional output for survival. You learned that Jung's shadow, the very traits you were taught to suppress, your coldness, your detachment, your capacity for ruthless indifference, are not your flaws. They are your dormant arsenal. You learned the shadow reversal, not as a technique, but as an identity. The observer, the fortress, the void. And you learned that when you hold the line through the frantic escalation, the manipulator does not simply lose the argument. They experience a narcissistic collapse so profound that their unconscious mind permanently reclassifies you as someone who can never be controlled again. Here is your final challenge, and I will deliver it to you the same way I have delivered everything in this video. Without softening it, you will be tested. Tomorrow, next week, the moment you close this video, someone in your life will throw bait at you. They will provoke, they will twist, they will deploy the same emotional extraction tactics they have used on you 1,000 times before. And in that moment, you will feel the old pull. The pull to explain, the pull to defend, the pull to care about being understood by someone who was never interested in understanding you. That pull is the ghost of your old self, reaching from the grave, trying to drag you back in. Do not let it. Let the old self stay buried. Your only response is silence. Your only posture is stillness. Your only expression is nothing. Let them escalate. Let them perform. Let them exhaust themselves against the wall of your indifference. And when they finally run out of ammunition, when the storm passes and the silence returns, you will still be standing, unmoved, untouched, untouchable. Refuse to process their toxic emotions for them. That is not your function. That was never your function. You were simply trained to believe it was by people who needed a container for the darkness they refused to face. You are no longer that container. You are the mirror. And mirrors do not absorb, they reflect. Let them see themselves. Let them deal with what they see. That is their burden, not yours. Never again yours. If this video reached into the part of you that has been silently screaming for permission to stop caring, for permission to be cold, for permission to watch them struggle and feel nothing, I want you to type 3 words in the comments right now. Type, "Let them break," because that is your new doctrine. You do not fix them. You do not save them. You do not absorb their chaos so they can pretend to be stable. You step aside. You become the void, and you let them break against the only thing harder than their cruelty, your indifference. Now hear me. If this is the first time you have entered this space, you need to understand what this is. This is not entertainment. This is not content designed to make you feel good for 15 minutes and then forget. This is a psychological armory built for one specific type of mind, the mind that is too intelligent for manipulation, too aware for gaslighting, and too powerful to remain anyone's emotional hostage. If you recognized yourself in every single word of this video, that is not coincidence. That is identification, and it means you belong here. Subscribe, not for passive consumption, for active armament, because every single video on this channel is another weapon in your arsenal, another layer of frame control, another degree of emotional intelligence that the manipulators in your life will never be able to penetrate. Join the silent strategists who are done reacting and have started engineering. Hit subscribe. The next weapon is already waiting. And whatever you do, do not stop here. The video on your screen right now was placed there because it contains the precise next piece of this puzzle. It addresses the one vulnerability that even the most disciplined practitioner of the shadow reversal still carries, the vulnerability that manipulators sense before you even know it exists. If you skip it, you leave that door unlocked, and everything we built today can be undone through the opening you did not know was there. Click it, watch it, seal the last breach in your fortress. I will see you there. See what others miss, know what others fear, become who others can't.